Arun had never felt the campus so empty until the day he moved into the hostel. Just a month ago, he had been a day scholar, cycling home through familiar streets, the sound of his mother's voice welcoming him back. Now, the hollow corridors of the hostel felt like a punishment for something he hadn't done. His father's absence hung over everything, though no one spoke of it. His mother Nisha called often, her tone careful, softened with guilt. She would talk of practical things, his meals, his studies, how the new arrangement was temporary. Behind her, a man's voice sometimes intruded, Dev Khanna, her new partner, who spoke as though Arun was a project to be managed. Arun listened in silence, speaking little, holding his resentment in control. It was in these muted spaces that Arun first overheard mentions of Dr. Elias Varun. Students whispered about him with unease, how he had been a respected psychologist once, how he still worked at school, though many thought his methods outdated. Arun listened but paid little attention. He was more concerned with surviving each day, his notebooks filling with quiet sketches and unfinished sentences. Life blurred into monotony, his father's shadow unspoken yet always there. Arun was a boy drifting with no anchor and no hope. His father's absence, a wound hidden but unhealed. One day, Arun was told he would be assigned regular sessions with Dr. Elias Varun. The announcement was made without ceremony, just another instruction handed down by the system. Elias was in his 50s, his presence quiet but with heavy exhaustion. His office was cluttered with books that smelled of another era, papers that looked as though they had not been moved in years. He regarded Arun with a weariness that mirrored Arun's own. The first sessions were routine. Elias asked questions, Arun gave short answers. The boy resisted, his silence sharper than his words. But Elias, unlike the others, did not rush him. He allowed the pauses to breathe, his gaze steady, never pressing. Slowly, Arun found himself speaking more. Not much, but enough to sense that someone was listening. Outside their sessions, Elias's life unfolded in quiet misery. He was tolerated at the school but not respected. Colleagues dismissed him, students avoided him, and his own faith in the profession had withered. He had once believed psychology could help, but in a world that had automated care and confined the vulnerable, his role had become ornamental. It was during one of these sessions that Arun first broke, speaking of his father, not by name, not directly, but through fragments, a man who had been taken, confined because of a judgment made not by people but by a system. Raghav, Arun's father, was a former systems architect in healthcare predictive modeling. He was the only one with enough of a conscience to realize the flaws in the system he had resigned to. But that very system flagged him as a psychological risk. An innocent man was now in a mental asylum for being the only one who was willing to stand up. Arun's words carried the weight of fear and love, anger and longing. Elias listened, something inside him stirring. That night, Elias could not sleep. He remembered when the courts had shifted, when trials became performances for machines, when rehabilitation meant erasure from society. Arun's father, he realized, had not been lost to madness, but to the machinery of order. Elias had decided, quietly, desperately, that he would help the boy. Not through polite sessions or distant words, but by finding a way to reunite him with the father who had been stolen. Their partnership deepened. Arun and Elias, once counselor and student, became unlikely allies. In their sessions, plans began to form. Hesitant at first, then clearer. Elias used old contacts, scraps of knowledge from when he had been respected, to locate where Arun's father had been confined. The world outside remained cold and distant. Students shuffled past without looking at one another. Teachers spoke in rehearsed monotones, and society hummed with the efficiency of indifference. Against this backdrop, Arun and Elias's connection grew, luminous, fragile but real. The day came when Elias arranged for Arun to see his father. They traveled together in silence, their steps heavy with risk. The care scepter loomed like a fortress, sterile and vast. Inside, the men and women confined there seemed more like ghosts than patients, their faces drained of memory. Arun's father, Raghav, laid alone, his eyes dim but alive. Their reunion was wordless at first, just a boy clinging to the man he thought he'd lost forever. Then came tears, whispered words, the fragile weaving of love through the cracks of despair. Elias stood apart, his chest heavy with something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. It was dangerous what they had done. The system did not forgive disobedience. Yet in that moment, risk felt irrelevant. Arun had seen his father again. That was enough. The reckoning was swift. Nisha and Dev Khanna were summoned to the school, their faces taut with shame and fear. Elias stood before them, calm, shoulders squared. He spoke simply. He had been the one to encourage Arun, the one to orchestrate the reunion. The blame, he insisted, belonged to him alone. The institute dismissed him without ceremony. His name was struck from the rolls. To most, he would fade into obscurity, another relic discarded by the machine of progress. As Elias packed his belongings from his office, the only one there to be by his side was Arun. To Arun, Elias remained something more, the one man who dared to care. Days later, back in his hostel room, Arun wrote in his notebook. The words were uneven, raw, but filled with a new fire. He had met his father again. He had seen what it meant for someone to stand beside him. The world outside remained cold, distant and efficient, but within Arun something had shifted. The boy who had once drifted was now anchored, not by certainty, but by the memory of a man who had done what needed to be done, no matter the cost. And in that, a fragile hope endured.